It takes only one girl to change the world. The Because I Am a Girl campaign has a simple goal: to unleash the power of young women and girls to improve the lives of them all in the developing world. And here now to tell us more about the efforts, Rosemary McCarney. She's President and CEO of Plan Canada. And it's good to have you back here at TVO.
Thank you very much.
Let's just start with Plan Canada. What is that for those who don't know?
Sure. Plan Canada is a part of the International Federation of Plan International. And Plan is one of the oldest and largest international children's charities in the world.
I read that today, like
75 years old this
1937
year,
or something you've been around.
Right,
yeah.
during the Spanish Civil War, with war and orphan children during that European catastrophe. And of course, you look at Spain today and it's quite a different place. So.
Indeed. I hate to do this to you, but we're going to talk about this awful incident a little bit here, and I want to know what immediately came to your mind when you heard the story about this poor 23-year-old woman in India who was raped and murdered.
You know, you're horrified, and then you're surprised that you're horrified. Because how many of these stories do we have to hear? And yet they continue to shock us. And I suppose that's a good thing. Like, we need to be shocked, but somehow we need to have sustainable indignation that leaves us past the shock, that mobilizes action, and outrage that this can still happen in 2013. And then, of course, you think about all of those girls and this particular girl, and then it's profound sadness that just because she is a girl, we've lost her.
You're in India, right? Your group is there?
Yes, very much.
What programs are you doing in India?
Plan India is part of the Plan Federation. So it's we have a large plan office there run by Indians. And again, our work is consistent around the world, a strong focus on children and the rights of children, and in particular girls and young women. So in India, the team is working, for example, in 5 states where the birth rates for girls are disproportionately low because of sex selection. So working on that in terms of awareness and working with leaders to take stands on that, to talk about the value of girls. In Delhi and Mumbai and some of the other major cities, we're working with UN Habitat and Women in Cities International. And how do you design cities to be safer for girls as they take their rightful place in institutions of higher learning and in the workforce? How do we design transit systems better? How do we design schools better? And how do we design the streets better and the layout so that they're safer cities for girls? So Plan in India is working across a number of things, as well as working very hard and tenaciously on how do you change attitudes about the value of girls, that they are to be valued.
You know, I remember Michael Ignatieff giving a speech once upon a time in which he said, teach a girl to read and you'll solve all the world's problems. And it's not as oversimplified as that sounds, actually. And I want to put some statistics up here, and then we'll talk a little more after that. Here are some facts about girls in our world today. 70% of the world's 1.4 billion people living in extreme poverty, girls and women. 70%. Girls are 3 times more likely to be malnourished than boys. 66 million girls do not attend primary and secondary school in the poorest countries in the world. 2/3. 66 million. 10 to 20% the amount in her lifetime income rises for every year of school a girl attends. How about that? 10 to 20% is the amount in her lifetime that income rises for every year of school that a girl attends. It's from a UNESCO report. And you guys have got a program called Because I Am a Girl. Tell us about that.
Well, it's easy to talk about Because I Am a Girl. We're all quite passionate about it. But what Plan did a few years ago is it took a look at what was going on around the world and asked the question of our colleagues and other NGOs and the United Nations, et cetera, and said, is anyone looking at the double whammy, the intersect between age and gender? And everyone said, no. You know, we're doing work and research on women, we do research on children, but not at that intersect of youth and gender. And what we found as we started digging into the data, doing primary research, secondary research, and bringing people together to look at this, is that the disproportionate impact of being both young and female was horrendous. So every year we publish a research report called The State of the World's Girls. And we look at it by theme. And so in past years we looked at girls in the global economy and what happens when an economy takes a downturn and how that disproportionately affects young girls in comparison to their male peers of the same age and social status, etc. We looked at girls in conflict situations and in war zones. We looked at girls last year in the educational system, that with the data that you saw. This coming year, what we're looking at is girls in emergencies. What happens? And in fact, over the weekend, I was looking at the first draft of the report, which will come out next fall, and there was one piece of data, just Sunday afternoon, reading this report and doing some edits on it, where, you know, the data is showing out of the UN agencies that 14 times more women and girls will die in a natural disaster. And there's all kinds of reasons for it. And it's the same thing we're talking about. It's that enhanced vulnerability often because of their role and status in a society. And so they may not learn about escape routes. They may not have been part of highlighting where the danger zones in their community are. They may not believe they can leave the house. And it's about social status and roles and poverty and stigmatization and all of those things that just keep hitting at them and impacting them disproportionately and highly negatively as well.
And thus it was important for your group to focus on girl-focused initiatives as opposed to society in general. Is that right?
Right. Well, plan focuses across. I mean, you need to have strong, sustainable communities to surround children. But what we also wanted to do is put a special spotlight on the particular situation of girls, because they were the ones being left behind, the most often to be malnourished, the most often to be left out of school, the most often to die or be left behind in a crisis. And so plan works across all of those parameters of health and livelihood and water, sanitation, and education, but we bring a gender lens to put a particular spotlight on the vulnerabilities of girls, but more importantly, the opportunities being missed by not investing in girls. And we measure those opportunities. We try to present really solid empirical case studies that invest in a girl's education, and here's what you're going to get in terms of the uptick in your gross national product, the uptick in terms of the likelihood of children under 5 to survive if they have an educated mother, the situation and the incidence of HIV and AIDS, 5 times more likely to be addressed if you're dealing with an educated mother. So the return on investment is substantial, and there's no silver bullet in the complexities of social, cultural, political life. But the closest thing to a silver bullet, Michael Ignatieff is right. It is an education. Educate a girl, and you get an awful big uptick in that investment.
Let me read something that you are well aware of, and that is your 2012 report. I want to read an excerpt of this to share with our viewers here. It goes like this. Every girl has the right to education, but there are 39 million 11 to 15-year-old girls out of school. At this age, their domestic and reproductive roles begin to dominate their lives at the expense of learning. Despite reaching global parity in primary school level enrollment, completion rates for girls still lag behind boys. And as research for this report has found, at adolescence, the pressures of poverty and discrimination mean that girls leave school to help at home because their families are not convinced of the value of their education, because they experience violence at school, because they get pregnant or married, because school is too far away and their parents think their daughters and their reputations are at risk. Governments all over the world have a chance to change this, to make a commitment to 9 years of quality education. Okay, a lot to kind of unpack there. Let's start with this. 9 years. What's magic about a 9-year commitment to quality education?
Well, the research would show that we've done pretty well in terms of achieving relative parity in many parts of the world on primary education. But we all know that primary education is just not enough nowadays, that a secondary school education is table stakes to be able to transition to a successful livelihood with economic opportunities, etc. So the 9 years was very deliberately chosen. It takes children through that transition. And what we found consistently in our research is whenever there's a decision point in a girl's life, the first decision point about whether she even gets to go to primary school. The second decision point, well, she's done that. Why do we have to keep, making this investment in secondary school? And so what we want to do is create a continuum of 9 years with a focus both on that quantity as well as the quality. So it was a minimum of 9 years of quality education. And we've unpacked that, what that looks like, what it should feel like, and what the educational outcome measures should be. And those are achievable goals. They're achievable by any country, anywhere in the world. And what we need to do is make sure that we're addressing those decision factors that might cause families to not allow their girls to pursue that minimum of 9 years. And you've highlighted them very well, but it's even more than that. So one of the things that we're doing as a follow-up to this report, having made this global call for 9 years of quality education, is what are the things that are getting in the way of that? And two of the major things are early and forced marriage. Too many girls, and for example, in India, half of the girls that are today 22 to 24 years of age in India were married before age 15. You know, so early and forced marriage is a significant problem, which leads to too early pregnancies and then maternal deaths when girls are too small and too young to bear children. And the other one is gender-based violence, particularly school-related gender-based violence, which we know is a universal problem that we're struggling with in our country as well. And those are two of the big constraints that cause parents to make the wrong decision about letting girls go to school.
But much of what you're talking about here, I suspect, involves changing cultural habits which have been ingrained for centuries.
Right.
How do you do that?
Well, we do it every day, don't we? I mean,
well,
even in this country.
Seems to me the story in India we're talking about here is something that people have been fighting against for centuries.
Well, perhaps not fighting against for centuries. But when you look at the remarkable, profound reaction by not just women in India, but men and boys in India as well, which is fundamentally important. I mean, these conflicts, these wars, if we're going to change cultures, we all have to be involved. And it's civil society, and it's national governments, and it's school boards, and it's how young boys and girls are educated and educated together about gender equality. Those are all fundamentally important things. We change culture every day in Canada. This isn't the Canada you and I grew up with in primary school, and some could say it's better or worse, but it's certainly different. And so culture's changing all of the time, and you know, that's why I think when we work in about 70 countries around the world, but that's 70,000 communities, and every community is unique and is at different stages of development and culture and attitudes. Can
I play curmudgeon for a second here? This is Canada. We have all of the benefits of a sophisticated, modern, industrialized, media-savvy, et cetera, society, and you know, we still have problems here that we've been working on for the last 50 years that there hasn't been enough progress on. You can make your lists.
Right.
Okay, let's go to societies around the world that don't have all of the advantages of being Canadian. And they've been, you know, they've been working these problems for decades and decades and centuries. I mean, doesn't that make you bang your head against the wall at times at how apparently hopeless this sometimes looks?
I don't think it's hopeless at all. And, you know, wherever I go in the world, and I've worked in hundreds of countries around the world, wherever I go, you find champions and leaders and those sparks, and that's who you work with, and they take the initiative. So whether we're dealing with girls in school, the fact that we've been able to get almost parity in primary education is less than one generation. The fact that we're able to get the laws onto the books, even if they're unevenly enforced, is being a decade of hard work, but
and then you'll find a young champion and they'll shoot her in the head. We saw that happen too.
We saw that happen too. And you know what? There'll be 10 more and 100 behind her, and soon it will change because we'll have a tipping point. I'm optimistic because I have seen the changes. Are they fast enough? Never. Are they you know, profoundly comprehensive enough? Never. But the changes are there, and I think what we have to do is celebrate the champions, honor those champions. Even this young woman who's died, let's honor her memory by making sure that the mobilization that is happening in a country like India, but that is being replicated in countries around the world, that we sustain that we affect change, that we create that spectrum of both protection, enforcement, and provision of services so women and girls are able to realize their full potential in all of our societies.
Is there any difficulty, this is, I even feel uncomfortable asking it, but let's try this. Is there any difficulty in a Western-based non-governmental organization going into the developing world and saying, with your heart as full of good intention as it obviously is, here's what you need to do?
Absolutely. I mean, every country is unique. Every country has a cultural history. It would be no different if someone arrived from India or Zimbabwe and said, Canada, this is what you need to do with your Aboriginal issues. And, you know, it's the same matter.
We'd get our backup if someone did that.
Absolutely. And that's why these must be addressed. They must be addressed locally. And so that's what Plan in India is, an Indian and international charity in India. It's with its own staff of people who are citizens in those countries who care deeply about the health and the future of India and its society and the protection of girls and women. So, but it takes everyone. It takes global covenants and global treaties that all of us have signed up to protect women, to advance the cause of women. So we need it happening at a global level, at a national level, at a local level, and right down to the school level. And we have to start young to change attitudes.
Teach a girl to read.
Teach a girl to read.
Never forgot that speech. Rosemary McCarney, President, CEO, Plan Canada. It's good of you to visit us at TVO tonight. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.